So today I'm very honored to be joined actually by
Mm.
John Paul Davies. He's a psychotherapist, counselor, coach, author, podcast host,
Mhm.
YouTube creator, and also a course teacher. But I think what's really important for me personally is that you are also a former solicitor for over 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to get into that, but first of all, I wanted to ask how you're feeling, how you're doing, how's today?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's been a good day, quite busy. Yeah, I'm really glad to be on here. Thank you for asking me to come on.
No worries. So what interested me was that career change from law to psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Was there a series of events that made you want to switch that path, or was it a light bulb moment? How did that process go for you?
It was it was a process, I would say. So yeah, I'd been a lawyer for I didn't do a law degree, but then I did a conversion course and became a lawyer. And I was doing that for about 9 years, something like that. I had been in therapy for a couple of years, and I suppose I was getting to the stage in my legal career where I'd need to start thinking about becoming a partner, if that would ever have happened. And I just saw that the to become a partner, going that was much more work, was more of the same really, and there wasn't really a huge amount of it that I was enjoying at the time. Probably one of the reasons I was in therapy as well. So yeah, so it was a process rather than a particular moment. I was getting the benefits of therapy, of course. I was really enjoying that. That was working well. And so what I decided to do was take a career break rather than actually stop being a lawyer completely, because it's such a sort of consuming thing to do as far as the time that's invested, the money that's invested in it, all those things. And of course, there's a lifestyle that goes with it. So it's quite a difficult transition to make, any transition in some ways. I get quite a lot of people contacting about, particularly coming from corporate environments, to becoming a therapist. And it is hard even to get your mind psychologically around perhaps what it will be like to go from a big organization working within one to working for yourself, but certainly the practicalities of training and funding all of that. So I made that easier, I think, for myself by taking a career break. So my firm offered a career break, and I did a few things. I did a screenwriting course as part of that, and I also did I worked for a charity on a phone line in London, and I also did a foundation year in counselling and psychotherapy. And so I did actually at the end of the year try to go back part-time to the law firm, but they didn't really offer that. This was probably 20 years ago. So it wasn't as, I'm sure there's more part-time and different routes now, but there wasn't there. So yeah, so I continue. I really enjoyed it. What I did in the counselling and therapy, the foundation year, I realised of the three things that I was doing, it was the one that made the most sense practically going forward, and it was the one I was enjoying the most as well. So I continued.
I'm sure it must have took a lot of courage. I'm sure you had a lot of um, internal conflict because I've gone through that same process where I feel like I've changed my mind so many times, and it's like I have multiple voices that tell me certain things, whether it's it might be too risky, think about
Yeah,
the practicality, think about that kind of things. But also, I think a lot of us walk with this heavy burden that we want to um, think about the opinions of other people, think about what my family would think, what my friends would think.
yeah.
How was that for you? How was that process of trying to maintain that relationship with people where you feel like you're honoring them, but you have to also consider your best interest because you live with yourself every single day. So how was that process,
Sure.
like, considering other people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was certainly a factor. I was at a stage where I had been doing it for 10 years. So I can't remember exactly how old I was. I think when I qualified, I was, oh, it's difficult, maybe 33, 4, something like that. So I had been doing it for quite a lot of my 20s in the law, which I suppose in some ways, I mean, I'd also got married and had a child at that point. So my daughter was, that was one of the main reasons actually for wanting to do something different when I think about it. There were the financial implications for my immediate family as well. My wife she worked for a hedge fund in the city, and she did a similar thing. She changed, I think, before my daughter was born, to work in childcare. So actually, that was helpful. We both were making that sort of significant change in career from sort of central London corporate life to something more vocational, perhaps more caring. So I certainly had her support because she'd done it. my wife. Financially, things were okay. I'd been a lawyer for a while. She'd worked in a hedge fund, so financially we were in a pretty privileged position there as far as being able to take some time off and do that. My wider family, I mean, certainly I think the idea of me being a lawyer would probably, to my parents, have sounded better and easier to understand probably than being a therapist. But I was a way down the line there, I would say. You know, I was in my early 30s, so that influence of parents would have been a lot less. I did have a family. I think most people around me, including lots of the lawyers, would understand why somebody wouldn't want to do that anymore. That's no criticism of law, but I'm sure there are plenty of people in it that love what they do as well. But often people understand that to be in corporate environments for long periods of time can have a cumulative effect. I guess those people would know me as far as what kind of things I enjoy, so they probably didn't think it was quite suited to my personality. There's a guy that I still know who was a partner in the law firm. I used to work for him, and he said, you know, you were a good enough lawyer, but it never quite, not that he told me that at the time, but it never quite seemed to suit your personality. So I suspect people around me knew that. But I think anybody that would have said, yeah, but, you know, being a lawyer, it's a highly paid job, and would probably just have been worried about the financial implications of it and all of those things. So, yeah, I think people understood the vocational career thing, the financial thing. I was enough down the line to be able to sort that out and know that I was in control of that. But when you say about internal things as well, I suppose one of the ways that I would look at people is we have that fear part internally to keep us alive, don't we? And then the part that's about the drives and the money and the status and the wealth. And then there's the part that's about connection, love of ourselves, connection with others, caring for ourselves, others. So even looking at it from that point of view, you could see that a move from a career in law, which I did, to therapy, I mean, the fear part is always going to be there, isn't it? We have to think about practically how that will work. Will I be good at it? I'm giving up a big job with a big income in order to do that. What would that all be like? So it's understandable that those questions are asked. And I think that place about the status, money, you know, those are very powerful things in where the environments that most of us live in. And so you can understand that part as well would be concerned about what it might all mean for that. Yeah, certainly for me, the therapy part, but going into therapy was much more about spending more time in connection with myself and others, you know, liking myself and others more in this environment. And actually, the more connected you feel, that is rewarding and you feel safe. But that's all having done it. I can see that for people before having done it, all those things they worry about. Which is probably why I get quite a few calls from people and contact from people who are looking to do it. Yeah.
That's really interesting, because I sense the common theme with what you said was that you took a lot of time, you took the career break, and you went through a moment of becoming self-aware, what you were good at, what you were interested in. What would you say for someone that's currently in the position you were in? How could they improve upon their self-awareness? Because I feel like we're living in a time where, this is my current life philosophy, but I truly believe that if you don't know who you are, you will be told who you are.
Yeah.
That's how I feel like, whether it's for your environment, your society, or just, you know, through the narrative that's being shared right now. How do you think someone can become more self-aware in this day and age?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I did some interview in one of the therapy magazines, and they were talking about what podcasts should people listen to, for example, or books or authors, that kind of thing, to learn more about themselves. And actually, as amazing as those things are, from the point of view of connecting with ourselves, but also with others, I think, you know, at least 50% of things should be getting to know ourselves better. And we can do that through other people, through something like this. Or also, though, I would say, you know, apps like Insight Timer, which are increasing somebody's connection between their mind and their body. So I think a lot of the time, if you're in an environment where I was in schools too, but then into work for a lot of people, particularly corporate environments, you have to come away from what you feel in order to get on with what you do during the day. And I think the trouble with that is, so people's mind and body connection, I think, tends to become disconnected. And as you say, we will tend to therefore make decisions and choices based on what other people have told us and other people's values. And they may align with our values or they may not. I think that's the trouble. It's also, of course, if you're going into training as a therapist to sit with people, we need to know what's going on with us internally, you know, physiologically, emotionally, as well as noticing what's happening with other people. So yeah, I think that process of getting to know self is incredibly important. Otherwise, how do we navigate life, make decisions, make choices in a way that works for us, rather than, I mean, as you said, in some ways, in a couple of guys, is, you know, when you were saying about what other people think, parents, that kind of thing. Of course, what they want, it's well intentioned mostly, isn't it? From parents, they are wanting us to do the thing that they think is the best thing for us to do. But I think the difficulty can be is if that isn't, we are different too. We're not exactly the same people. We are different people. So how do we honour that, the fact that we are different, and also bear in mind we need to earn an income and keep ourselves safe physically and psychologically. Yeah.
I wanted to get into the actual therapy part, so how you're practicing and things like that.
Yeah.
How long have you been practicing?
I qualified in 2012, but I did start to see clients in 2010. You could do that in your third year, or maybe 2011. So you could start seeing clients whilst training, just at a lower cost. So I started seeing people, it's probably 2011 actually, so it's 12 years coming up to 13 years. Yeah.
What do you think in those 12 years of being a therapist, what have you learned about yourself? Because I feel like it's as it should be. We place a lot of focus on the client, but I think being a therapist, you have to really, really understand and know what you're learning, and because you can't really pour from a cup that's not really full, right? To be the best helper, you must help yourself, and I think that's part of the BACP ethical framework, right? To focus on yourself as well. But what has being a therapist taught you about yourself that you haven't really expected to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think being a therapist, I'm in the middle of thinking about doing a video on 10 things I wish I knew before I became a therapist. I mean, it has changed everything, and well, not everything. I'm sure somebody who knew me 15 years ago would still recognize me as a person, but yeah, learned so many things really about, I mean, all sorts of things come up, of course, with clients, because there's a range of things that people come through with. I remember somebody saying, one of the things that I've done on my YouTube channel is speak to other therapists, and somebody said that as far as what clients are paying for, this is just one person's interpretation. If you ask therapists, there'd be 100 different answers to that. But she said it's a regulated nervous system, so that we feel in a calm and balanced state. That's really, it's only in that place that we can offer the best sort of container for clients. And that doesn't mean that people don't get annoyed or frustrated or whatever it might be, but the importance of that for sitting with clients when you say about self-care, because of course, if I need to be able to contain whatever a client brings, if they get slightly frustrated or irritated and I rise up and escalate, that could, I mean, as human as it is, that could be a re-wounding, re-traumatizing experience for them, really. Communication, how to communicate things in a way that is going to be most easily received by the other person. That's important. Sometimes you have to reflect back things which somebody might find difficult. Most people appreciate the honesty. Having said that, even if somebody says, at least theoretically, they appreciate the honesty, if it's perceived as critical, you don't want to shame somebody, and those things are helpful for life generally. You know, to be able to talk to somebody and feedback what you're experiencing in a way that somebody can hear. That's helpful for romantic relationships. Another big thing, I mean, there would be lots of them, but just would be boundaries and holding boundaries and the importance of boundaries, time, money, you know, those practical ones that come from therapy. But, you know, what my boundaries are like, how to put boundaries in by communicating, how much anxiety that might bring, both for me and also the client. So what I was thinking when I'm, these 10 things I wish I knew before I became a therapist, it has helped. That's one of the things I would say about becoming a therapist, certainly for me, is it's not just I am this person outside the therapy room and then come into the therapy room and be this person as a job for money. It is, it's changed the way I would see people generally. It's changed the way I'd see myself. It's sort of changed the way I relate.
That makes me feel like there's jobs and then there's careers, but then I think it's another category that we fail to always consider, but that's a life path. I truly believe that being a therapist or a psychologist or something like that, this is a life path. This isn't something that you just check in and check out.
Well, I was just going to say, no, I think that's absolutely true. Because I would say job or work, and it just doesn't feel that. It doesn't feel like that. Because the other thing, of course, is, and it's going to be more or less important to different therapists, but if we are sitting talking to clients who are in a lot of distress, or perhaps so that their difficulty is chronic anger and they're flaring up outside of sessions, it is easy to say to somebody what they might need to do. About, not that we tell people what they need to do, but what might help. But I do think it's important from a kind of integrity or congruence point of view to be living that too outside. Again, this is not all human beings ebb and flow and connect and disconnect and frustration and anger, and just as love and sadness, they're all a part of life and a feeling life, of a complicated life, which most of us lead, including therapists. So that making sure that there isn't a big gap between the public and the private, it does. It sort of results, or has for me, in quite a change across the board, I would say. In person, I don't know how to describe it really, not personality, but how I see myself in the world.
It seems like there's quite a bit of a duality there, like a paradox. So you want to be the therapist and you want to maintain that personality outside of work, but then how do you really maintain not carrying the person's sorrows and the issues? How does it not leak into your relationship with your child or your friends or your partner? How do you stop that from leaking in? Because it must be really easy just to think about that client outside of work, because you want to help them. This is your intention. So.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another thing that I was thinking about as well. Because people will say, "God, I don't know how you can do it," to sit and listen to people's difficulties. And there are certainly things that I would have heard, because of I've seen quite a lot of people over the years. There are still things that I would remember, because when somebody describes something to you, we will imagine it. So to hear a traumatizing story is, there are still things that I can still picture certain things. Of course, I wasn't there, but naturally, what we'll do is imagine that happen. And sometimes, if it's happening in our imagination, it's happening. So, so you do get therapists talk about sort of vicarious trauma, and the fact that which one of the reasons why self-care is so important too. The thing that I would say about that is I haven't really experienced that a huge amount. What I would say much more is that it's not that somebody just tells the traumatizing story and then that's it. What therapy is, for me, I suppose, is fundamentally hopeful, and it's a process, and that's sort of where it starts, and then it continues from there. There is something, whatever has happened gets brought into relationship. Often the difficulty for people is it's closed by them and moved back in a way which is sort of unhelpful to them. Perhaps they deserve something, and they've developed beliefs about other people that they can't trust them. So it's not that. So actually, you see the development of something through a therapeutic relationship. Something changes. And in my experience, you might say that's sort of more person-centered as well. People fundamentally want to move towards growth and to integrating that experience in a way that no longer sort of holds them back. It will always be difficult and be distressing of itself. And there's something about that process which actually has hugely reinforced might be the wrong word, but increased trust in human beings and our resilience. You might think, hearing lots of stories of people's difficulties, could have done the opposite, but that is not the case at all. I mean, I wouldn't say I necessarily see, in terms of my client group, the kind of big T trauma every day, which some people would be working with, the kind of rape and sexual abuse, for example, that as you know, all day. So it may be something to do with the kind of degree of trauma, if you want to put it like that, that I work with. But generally, it's really something that has very much increased my sort of trust in people. And despite the fact that people can do, sometimes terrible things can happen to people, you know, people can work through that, whatever that looks like, within therapy. And as I say, that I think, to me, that's not that it has to be, but a fundamentally sort of hopeful and optimistic experience.
You said that it's helped you trust humans more, even though that people are sharing their maybe not so best parts of them. How do you, I guess, how do you measure your success as a therapist? Is it the fact that they can trust you enough to speak to you, or is it the fact that they're actually achieving what they want to achieve outside of the therapy room? What's the metric of being a good therapist?
Well, I think that's one of the that can be difficult to work out. And you can see that that's very much something that clients will be thinking about too, because it's time for them, it's money, it's an open-ended, private therapy. So there's a cost to it. So people want value. And I do for clients as well. What that value looks like, it can come in all sorts of different ways. You know, it might be even to get tearful in therapy. That something for another person, it might be to say something that they've never told anybody before because they were ashamed of it, or whatever that might be. For another person, it could be that they attend sessions. You know, there are certain people where they have not prioritized relationship in their lives. They've, for example, prioritized work, and relationships have become peripheral to that. Perhaps they push forward with money and status and those things at the expense of, I mean, there's good things to have, aren't they, but at the expense of their relationships. And you could say that so their tendency might be to want therapy to constellate around work. So they'll say, the weekly thing, it just doesn't really work for me. Perhaps we could, meet every few weeks, or actually I can't make it this week or next week because I've got a meeting, or whatever it might be. And that's life, isn't it? People do have meetings. But for someone where relationships have actually come secondary to, and connection has come secondary to a career and achieving and building, well, actually to attend weekly, to say to whoever, I can't do that time for that meeting because they might not say they're in therapy, but to somehow put a boundary around it, that's success. That's of significant value to them, because in that moment they have prioritized their connection with themselves and their connection with another person, me, in a therapeutic relationship. There's so many different ways, I would say, for one person, another person, it might be that something was said that they weren't very keen on. I would never deliberately try to annoy somebody, but occasionally something may not land in a way, or a joke might be made which might not land in the way that it was intended. And for somebody to come the next week and say, I found that difficult, and talk about it, it could be the most significant thing they've done in relationship for decades. It is. And then for somebody else, they've got chronic anger, and we talk about sober, stop, observe, breathe, expand, respond as a technique. And they remember it on the Thursday afternoon when they're about to shout at their child and they don't do it. Or they wait 5 minutes before they do it. I don't think it's written it, but they don't do it. So they experience something differently. Or somebody who's addicted, rather than stopping whatever, acting out with a behavioral substance, maybe the thing that shows as a value is that they develop another relationship in their life. They don't immediately stop engaging with the behavioral substance, but they start to have a greater degree of intimacy, emotional intimacy with somebody else in their life, which is giving them something else to go to rather than just the behavioral substance that they're used to. So all of those things I probably so all of those things are potential successes, but it may be a client's idea of what's going to be success is they would not necessarily say that from the beginning. Somebody who's addicted or dependent would say that success is they no longer, they've stopped going to that behavioral substance.
Just to build upon that, so it seems like every single person has their own set of goals through whatever means, depending on them and their circumstance. But if you could just imagine you have access to the whole world and everyone is right there in front of you, what would one piece of advice be? Knowing what you know now, you must have experienced so many different people with so many different issues and problems in their life. But if you could give one general piece of advice, which I know is probably not the best thing to do, but if you could and you can share it with the whole world, what would you say and what would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be one. It would be about trust of self and trust of others. I think generally, but then it isn't a simple piece of advice in some ways, because trust of others, we need to be able to choose who to trust as well. We need to be discriminate in terms of trust of other people.
I was going to say, yeah, trusting is it's actually a very scary process. You're putting yourself out there and being vulnerable. It's like almost like welcoming not a fight but conflict. As you know what I'm saying, like if they break your trust, then that's going to affect the trust that you might have to build 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. So
absolutely.
Like, I feel like it's a difficult thing.
And that's why people don't. It's why people protect themselves, even overly protect themselves, isn't it? Because it's so painful. But I think the thing is, if we protect ourselves from feeling anger or fear or hurt, we don't feel love or joy either, potentially. So we have to. It's the range of emotions. You can't have all the ones we want without the ones we don't, I think. But yes, I mean, one of the main things I would be certainly is trust yourself. I would say, but but linked to what you said earlier is to get to know who you are as well, because that makes interactions with other people, I say, easier. There's always going to be complexities to it, but people are going to say things all the time, aren't they, about you are this or you are that. An amount of that is projection onto you because of somebody your age or whatever that might be. So we need to know when we're relating to people who we are. So I think finding out who you are, and I would also say trusting other people. The importance of relationships and having relationships in life that are co-regulating, that feel good. I know that's probably not a very concise piece of advice in some ways, but I would put those two areas as the ones where I would put the focus, definitely.
You actually you wrote a book, Finding a Balanced Connection, right?
Yeah.
How did you trust yourself to write that book? Like, how did you go against that imposter syndrome? Because writing a book is very, very hard. I'm trying to write my first one, and I've gone through already 20 creative blocks. So how did you trust yourself enough to write that book?
Well, it was. It's interesting that the process of training for therapy is an integrative course. There's so many different schools of sort of therapeutic ideas. Oh my goodness, there's another 50 or 60 that have probably come since. There's so many things that people can do, and I think what I wanted and was looking for all through it, in some ways, was sort of a frame. Not that it's imposed on people, but a way of understanding myself and the world and clients and people generally, because clients are people generally. So what I think what I was trying to do was build that frame, and some of the things that I learned during the course certainly did that. Certain things worked for me and made sense and fitted around that frame. And then there was I did some training afterwards, after I qualified, something called compassion focused therapy, and a model that was in that, which is the threat, reward, and connection. Quite a simple way of looking at human beings, really made sense. And it wasn't that I thought, well, that is going to be the one I'm going. It was just that when I was thinking about myself and others and listening to what was coming back, it was somehow was always at the forefront. So it just became a way of understanding myself and others more, that was able to sort of firm up this frame, really. And then lots of other things come on top of that and make sense around it. Music, I would be listening to a lot. I listen to a lot of music, particular song lyrics. So all sorts of things. So others were a big part of it, of course, and they would again add to and form around and firm up this way of seeing myself and understanding myself and others. Yeah, and I turned that into a book. But as you say, it was a very what's the word? Not exposing is probably too strong a word, but with therapy, it's within a private practice room. Of course, clients might go out and say what's talked about. Some of them will, but there isn't a public view about what you believe and think. But actually, in a book, it's open to the general public what you believe and think about the world. I did start by making it very sort of general and wonder this and that kind of language that you might use in the therapy room. But I did have an editor for the book, and she used to work in one of the big publishing houses for self-help books, actually. And she did 2 rounds of editing for it. And she said, you've got to change the language to it to say what you suggest people do. And that's not what therapists do generally. So it was, I could have stopped at that point and not done it. But what I have noticed is, having put it out there, if it works for people, they'll love it. If it doesn't, it will just move on past them. I thought, oh my gosh, what will UKCP do, or my training institution, if it isn't exactly what they want to read? Or whether any of them have, I don't know. But I would definitely encourage people to do it, because for me, it's sort of firming up how you see yourself in the world. And that's not just for a book to sell a book. That's how you relate, isn't it? How safe you feel. So yeah, it was very good for voice. It was good for that voice and visibility part of, and trusting myself, but also trusting other people. Generally people are complimentary. If somebody doesn't like it, you get the odd person, because that's the thing. Putting it out on Amazon, anyone can read it and anyone can comment. But generally people are, very constructive. I think if most people, if they're not that keen on something or it doesn't really resonate, they just let it go past. Yeah, it's been a really good experience.
It seems like you're really, well, I'm assuming here, just to say I'm assuming, but I checked your website. It seems you're very entrepreneurial. YouTube channel, the podcast, the book. Yeah. What made you discover that you are entrepreneurial by nature? Because coming from a corporate world, it's more like it's quite confined, right? You do what you need to do. Then when you finish the work day, you can rest and you can think about it in the morning. But how did that radical shift come? That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect I wouldn't necessarily have said it about myself. I would have said my natural tendency would be to, even within law. Actually, I became a lawyer because I did a business management degree at King's in London. And then I tried to get a job. What I was looking to get a job in was HR, marketing. I tried some jobs in that, but human resources. So I was always looking for something which had that sort of, whatever it would have been like in reality, that sort of human contact. But I suppose, I was quite good at economics at A-level, and then went on to do a management degree. So I wouldn't see myself in that way particularly, but I do have some interest in business, I suppose, coupled with, so I suppose you could say it's quite left and right brain. I was always interested in people and why they did what they did. So you could see that even the business things I was doing, perhaps marketing was more about psychology, HR would have been about relationships. That would be my idea of what HR was, about relationships with people. So I think it's always been there. And then I suppose going into law, what I wanted to do a bit more after a while was do more support lawyer. So that would have been more training, more liaison with clients, producing research articles, that kind of thing. So again, within a corporate environment, I was trying to do things that were more human, so to speak. So I just think both parts have always been elements of my personality. I think it's probably left and right parts of the brain, if you want to look at it in that way. So I suppose coming into therapy as a private practice, there's more emphasis on connection with human beings. That's the main thing, which I think is more aligned to me. And being able to, it is a business. So I am able to do that part of my being and brain is able to have expression as well. the sort of more business entrepreneurial one. I would say that something generally about the industry, if you want to put it that way, is there's so many different opportunities now, so many different media, so many different people, places, organizations around the world that are interested in well-being and mental health, that I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the world really is your oyster if you want to do that. There are plenty of people who want to run their private practice, just make that work around their life, their families, it gives them a certain amount of income, and that's what they want to do, and they love it. And then I meet all these other people as well who have very successful podcasts, or they go and do lectures at these international conferences, or all the sorts of other things, go into corporate environments and go into law firms and teach people about trauma. I'm talking to a law firm that used to be next door to the law firm I used to work in, and they are doing training on banter and the part of that in corporate cultures, because
That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, there's a big change at the moment. So there's the legal aspect of that, and it's connection potentially with harassment and bullying. But what they want is somebody to talk about the psychological aspects of banter, sensitivity, personality, window of tolerance, trauma in that context. So I'll be doing that in January, hopefully. But yeah, so there are all these opportunities. And I'm by saying about all these opportunities, I'm not in any way trying to diminish that somebody wants to see 10 clients a week as part of a life where they do all these other things outside of work as well. And they really enjoy it from that point of view. And it's a great thing about the career, I would say, is it, because people might say to me, how much, I know, I think it's because of the career that I came from, how much can you earn, that sort of thing. And I think, well, if you did corporate training 3 days a week, I know somebody that was on television. She was a therapist on a reality TV show, and earned significant amounts of money doing it. So you could be more corporate, you could be private practice. If you're in private practice, you may be in an environment in central London where you can charge X amount an hour, or you might be somewhere where you could, it's difficult to charge more than 35 or 40 pounds an hour. So it's really, and that's what the importance about knowing who you are, I think, as well, because certainly when you work for yourself, largely that's what it comes down to. You make those decisions, nobody else. Some people have coaches. Some of the people that I know that are more entrepreneurial as therapists, they have coaches to help them run their business and that kind of thing, which I can understand why they do that. So it's not necessarily a word that you would put with therapist, entrepreneur, I would say, but I certainly meet quite a lot of them. Yeah.
Why do you think that word has a stigma around it, entrepreneurial? It's like that you think of like an angry capitalist that wants to take all the money and avoid taxes, but I think
exactly.
you actually provide a lot of value if you are.
Completely. That's the thing, I think, isn't it? That I think it's often the case. If you're looking at drive, I think drive can be hooked. People's status and material acquisition can be at the expense of connection and relationship with other people. That sort of lacking empathy, very sort of narcissistic kind of personalities within firms that create difficult cultures, and so from that point of view, it can, I suppose, there can be some narcissism that is with it. Somebody who's driven through that entrepreneur is sort of thinking outside the box and being special, because but that can be at the expense of connection and how they treat people. I think that can be, so it can get bad press. I think what I would say that is an ideal is when that drive is hooked to things that you love, and also connection to the community. That doesn't have to be like that for everybody, of course not. But in that situation, I suppose entrepreneurship and drive is attached to something that's helping self and others. And I think personally, that's the ideal. I think that people might worry that it's somehow you're sort of out for yourself because of pointy elbowed, don't care about other people, and the last thing you would want a therapist to do is not care about other people, I guess. But I think certainly the two can be married, put together, and that would be to me that's the ideal.
I'd like to agree with that as well.
Yeah,
I'm aware of the time, so I've got a couple more questions.
sure.
I want to do a quick fire round, okay? So
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you two options. You have to pick one. Try not to think too much about it, okay?
Okay.
Freud, Carl Rogers.
Probably Carl Rogers. Yeah.
Jung or Adler?
Only that I probably know less about Jung, Adler, and more about Jung. I would say dreams.
So now okay, it's the final now. So it's between is it I've got Jung and Rogers.
That's difficult. They're both very different. I think, back to basics, I would probably say Rogers, I think.
Good answer, because I'm just asking you that because I'm trying to study all of them, and it's so interesting that there's so many ways to look at one specific thing. So that's why I believe the integrative approach is really advantageous. But I was always thinking about the
but it's amazing to do it, isn't it? And there is also the part of it which is like, who am I within all of that, But that does become clear, I think, over time. Yeah.
So which modality? You are integrative, right? But if you had to just pick one modality, which one?
It's difficult. I mean, my course was integrative. It was transpersonal as well. So that is, they took in sort of Eastern and Western religion, spirituality. They would they did incorporate that, archetypes, Jung, into dreams.
Oh, I love the whole archetype stuff. Oh my gosh, it's so interesting.
Alchemy. They would do alchemy, talk about that as a process, as of human development, but a process for human beings. It's quite difficult. I would, as as a basic model, I think it probably would be that compassion-focused therapy model. Human givens came into my mind today, which is. I think the idea, it wasn't taught on my course, neither was compassion-focused therapy, but that we have sort of given things like dreams, the breath work, meditation. We have things that are given to us as human beings that we can tap into. A human givens therapist will probably listen to this and say that's absolutely not what human givens is, but my understanding of it, right? But that we have these things that we're naturally equipped with, and we just need to put more energy into them in order to sort of rebalance things. I like, neuroscience. That was, again, not taught on my course really at all. But having said that, things like the dreams was. So there's just lots of everything, and different people, from a client point of view, it's one of the good things about an integrative course, like different things as well. Some people are very cognitive, so the kind of neuroscience, how those things work, more cognitive behavioral type way of looking at things is very helpful as a way to connect with them. And then I will speak to other people who immediately describe sensations in their bodies. So they very much have this connection, and they think in terms of sensations, and so for them it'd be looking more at what is happening physically. They might come up more with images, and you can work with an image more. So it is, I mean, that's the idea of I think an integrative course, certainly because you can find out the therapist that you are, and also there are different things for different people, for different clients too. So it is difficult to pin one. As I say, the book would be based on compassion-focused therapy, that model.
I am reading this book. I'm pretty sure you've heard about this. The Therapeutic Relationship.
Who wrote it? Is it? I can't.
Petruska Clarkson.
Oh yeah.
And what she said was, it's actually not dependent on the modality itself, but the actual relationship. That's the main thing. So I think all of us can take a rest and between
you really can.
FOMO, right? You don't want to feel FOMO, but it's just the actual relationship itself, which is so interesting, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's, I mean, I think the kind of academic theoretical stuff is important, and there is an expectation, I think, to some degree from clients that some of that is around, definitely, because it is helpful as a frame for things and understanding things. I mean, I'm glad you said that, because I haven't even mentioned that kind of relational. Well, I suppose I have in the context of boundaries and communication. But that actually a lot of the therapists that I would talk to talk about the importance of the relationship and working with the relationship. And one of the things I would mean by that is, as well as the content they bring about what happened out there with that person and what that meant, or what happened to them as a child, or it's also what happens in relationship with the therapist, and how I might feel about them, how they might feel about me. As I say, if something happens that they want to talk about or struggle with, or they cancel and I charge, and someone experiences that as lacking in empathy, or all those things. There's not necessarily a theoretical model for that, but that somebody raises it, that it's talked about, that they feel heard, understood, attuned to, and the relationship continues and is repaired if there was a rupture, can be one of the most significant things that happens in therapy. Aside from everything that Jung said, or it is also two people in a room relating. Yeah.
I have two more questions.
Okay.
I'm sorry to take your time. Let's say John Paul, the 20-year-old version of John Paul's right in front of you right now. What is the one piece of advice you'd give him, knowing what you know now?
That's interesting. 20.
I say 20 because it's near my age, and I'm being selfish in this sense. So I want to know.
I think I would. I think it is interesting. There are, now I enjoy my life much more, certainly, than when I was 20. I'm not necessarily somebody who would say, I wish I hadn't done that. So I think it would be something more to the things, that it's going to be okay. Or when you said about getting to know yourself, that I would say I probably would have done that sooner. So yes, it would be something around that. But even trust the process. I know that's something that's talked about a lot in therapy, but you can say that of a life journey as well. Interesting. I hadn't really thought about it before. Yeah.
I always find that interesting, because I always wonder what I would, when I get older, what would I tell myself now? And I try to become that person, even though he doesn't exist, so that I can act right now. But it's quite a hard concept, because you obviously don't know what's going to happen.
It really is. I mean, I would say, do more of what you love, I suppose. Something like that. There's 10 things I could think that are really nice ways of looking at self and the world. But then if I wouldn't have taken the route that I did through, taken the route that I did job-wise, perhaps. And actually, there are things that came out of that, as far as the experience that I've had in corporate environments, working with clients who have gone through that. There's plenty of skills as far as organizing things, focus, drive that have come from that too. So yeah, I wouldn't.
It seems like everything worked out.
Exactly, because I'm not sure
everything can happen for a reason, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure I would say anything to change the course of life. If anything, it would be do more of what you love. Work out what it is you love and do that. That's what I say to my daughter, who's 17.
That's really good advice. Advice. I want to start a closing tradition on my podcast. So I'm going to ask every single guest that before we leave, what is your favorite quote? Even if it's one that you've made yourself.
I'm the little book of Instagram quotes. It's so difficult. They're all competing now. Shame dies where stories are told in safe places, I think, is a good one for therapy. But I can never quite remember them. But there is it's a long. I put one at the end of the thing that I'm going to stop now because I will go forever. There's one about men, which is that most men lead lives of quiet desperation and die with the song still in them. I quite like, only because it's in my mind. But I suppose generally, if you're looking at therapy as well, and I can't remember the quote, but it's something to the effect of most people's distress, or pretty much everyone's distress, comes from things that they've experienced in relationship and as a result of relationship. So the only way through is relationship with somebody else. I know that's a big sell or a sell for therapy and some of it. It's not necessarily just therapy that's the only way to do that. But yeah, again, I've given some options, and comparison is the thief of joy. I could go on forever.
There's 3 great quotes. I'll try and write them all in the description. But yeah, I think that's it from me today. Thank you so much for joining. You are genuinely one of the first people on my podcast, and I appreciate the fact that you accepted, even though I don't know how many views it's going to get, but I appreciate it regardless.
Amazing. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah.
Please do make that video, 10 things you wish you knew before you're a therapist.
That's next. Not next week, the week after. Yeah.
Okay, nice. And good luck on your training, the banter training in January.
Yeah, January. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. Once again, I'll link John Paul's book in the description, his YouTube channel, podcast. Everyone, please do check him out. Subscribe to him. Buy everything. Either way, thank you so much, and I'll see you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Fahim.